Today, I'm really excited. I have a lot to share with you, and I'm really happy that all of these features are finally out in TanStack AI. So, without further ado, let's talk about them. So, I'm gonna start with the blog, and I'm gonna go over all of the features that we added this week, and you're gonna be really excited about most of them. But before we do that, I just wanna go over one of the coolest things that happened recently, and that's the fact that OpenRouter has become an official partner of TanStack AI. And this is really cool and awesome. And I'm so happy that they are a part of the TanStack community and supporting us in official capacity, because we at TanStack really love OpenRouter, and they have done a stellar job at allowing people to try out different models, switch between providers, and just have a great time working with LLMs. And I just want to personally thank them for sponsoring us, for supporting us. And with that out of the way, let's actually get into the cool new features that you can use with TanStack AI. And because we launched so many of them, let's go in order. So the first order of business is the generation hooks. And this has been a long time coming because we launched support for image generation, video generation, all of these cool things a while ago, but there was no client-side counterpart for that. Well, today we have brought it to TanStack AI. I'm not gonna read through all of the blogs and just dump some huge text on you. I'm just gonna talk about the implications and how things work under the hood for each one of these. So what we've done with generation hooks is we've added useGenerateImage, useGenerateSpeech, useTranscription, useSummarize, and useGenerateVideo. So all of these hooks have the same API. So basically, if you wanted to generate videos, you would just swap this hook and it would return the same API. So you would get the generate, you would get result, is loading, whatever. So basically, all of these hooks are identical in terms of API. The only thing that changes is the actual props you pass into them. And what you do is you basically, for example, use the hook and then you say, generate me an image with this prompt, and that's pretty much it. So for example, let's say you wanted to build image generation and you wanted to spit out 3 images. So the result is fully typed. You get the errors back if they happen. You can like stop generation, reset it. You can generate multiple images at the same time. You can do whatever you want. So that's really cool. And this works, like I said, across all of them. So this is not just tied to images, but this is the example we used here. And another cool thing about this architecture is there are actually like 3 ways to connect. The first one is basically the classical server-sent events approach. So basically, you use the 2 server-sent events response utility on the server, and then you have fetch server-sent events on the client. So you have your basically hook on the client, implementation on the server. And what that would look like in code is, for example, you have this generation's image route. It has this useGenerateImage and it connects via connection to API generate image. And if I open API generate image, it basically takes in a post request, extracts the JSON data, and then passes it into the generate image, sets the stream to true, and then returns it. So that's your first way of handling it. So your classical server-sent event stream. And this is really cool for video generation, which I'm going to show you in a little bit. But that is your first way. So the second one, and the cool one, is the direct fetching. So there's another prop on the useGenerateImage called fetcher. And this basically takes the input of your generate and then calls a function. So basically you can create a fetch request that returns a promise or something like that. This has really been built with server functions in mind. If you think about this paradigm, it's really easy to set up server functions that do this. So for example, this is a server function that generates a stream for the image generation, and you can just do useGenerateImage, fetcher, and then pass in the server function and pass it in the arguments. And then on the server side, you just do generate image stream function. You create a method for post, you validate the input, and basically you just pass it in a handler. You say to server sent event response, generate the image, and it's just gonna generate an image. What happens in the end is you just pass in the server function and it works out of the box. You can either stream it or return a direct promise that returns an image. And then the last exciting bit about all of this is that, for example, let's say your fetcher returns the raw data for speech, for example, and you don't want to pass back into your app the raw data, you want to transform it first. Well, we offer an onResult callback that gets called when you get back the response. And then what you can do is you can take in the raw response and basically transform it. So for example, here I create an audio file and then I return that back to the user. And then the result becomes fully typed and it basically becomes whatever you return from onResult. So for example, audio URL format and duration. So for example, you can create a utility here, for example, transform raw audio to file, for example, and just pass it in, and it's gonna transform the result for you and make it type safe. And this also works for all the other hooks. And the last thing about these hooks that's really cool is the video generation. Because how video generation usually works when you're talking with an LLM, you tell it, hey, create me a video, and then it creates a job, returns you the ID of the job, and then you have to poll that job until it's done. And it takes usually a minute for it to generate a video, and then it can also return like it's 30% done, it's 60% done, it's 90% done, it's done, and then it gives you back the data. Well, that's really cool, but that's kind of cumbersome to implement on your side. And how it works with TanStack AI is you basically have useGenerateVideo. So this is the same as before, as I told you. So you can fetch server sent events. You can also use server functions for this, but I'm not doing it in this example. And then here, you just say stream true, and this returns the stream, and then you send it back with to server sent events response, and this is gonna first of all kick that job off, and then internally it's going to poll every 3 seconds for maximum of 60 minutes or whatever you set it to, and it's gonna send you back the video when it's done. So basically all of it is done for you. All you have to do is send this back, and that's pretty much it. And that is the first part of the 4 blog posts. And you can actually read through this. So for example, every activity, the same API, and you can see like the inputs, the outputs, how to get started. You can play around with this and like see if you like it or not, but that's pretty much it. All right, so on to the next one, lazy tool discovery. This one is really cool and it's like really simple, so we can like breeze through it, and I'm just gonna explain how it works. But basically the issue is, let's say you have 100 tools in your application and you need to send all of this data to the LLM. You're gonna spend so many tokens. Well, the cool thing about the lazy tool discovery that we built in is that you can tell the tools that they are lazy. And what this means is we're not going to send them up front to the LLM. Internally, we are going to create a tool manager that is going to send only a single tool to the LLM and basically tell the LLM, hey, these 80 tools are lazy, here are their names, here is what they do. You can discover them by calling our internal tool. And then when the LLM calls the internal tool to discover a tool, we're just going to register it and let the LLM call it. And this way you save a bunch of tokens, and it opens up the possibility for you to have infinite amount of tools where the LLM just keeps discovering them on their own. If you have some sort of system that generates these tools over time, you can literally just like mark them all as lazy and then just let the LLM discover what it needs. And the only thing you need to do to enable that is set lazy to true on your tool definitions. And that's pretty much it. So basically, it's going to send it to the LLM discovers it, it calls it responds with a result, and then later on, if you call that same tool again, it already knows about it, so you don't have to do it again. And that is how it works. And for example, you can see examples here. So for example, these are the core tools that we care about. So get guitars and recommend guitar. And then for example, this is a lazy tool. So this and this one is going to be lazy loaded. So we pass those into our chat function, and only 2 of them are sent up front, all the other ones are hidden. And then for example, you can even like map over these and mark them as lazy if you want, or do some crazy stuff on top, so it's really up to you. This actually leads me really nicely into our third blog post, and that is middleware. So if you've been using AI, you've probably gotten used to other providers providing you a way to transform something before the next iteration, or transform a tool call or something like that. Well, we wanted to unify that under a single API instead of having like on next iteration, on next tool call, on next this, and then having it like spread on 20 different properties. Well, we now offer middleware. And basically how middleware works is you get this type called chat middleware, you construct an object with a name, and then you get a bunch of callbacks. These callbacks are basically 12 hooks that you can hook into your execution flow. And the first one is onConfig. So this first of all runs when you first initialize the conversation, and then afterwards for each iteration of the conversation it fires again. And this allows you to basically, for example, change system prompts between iterations, change tool calls, change whatever you want. So you can modify whatever you want in the config. And then the other one is on start. You have on iteration, on before tool call, on after tool call, on tool phase complete, on usage, and then your final on finish, on abort, and on error callbacks. So all of these are for different use cases. So for example, let's say on before tool call, you can use these to, for example, cache tool calls. So for example, if the LLM asks for the weather, or if the user asks for the weather in Berlin, you can cache that result, and then the next time he asks for the weather in Berlin, you just have the answer. And then, for example, you can also use on after tool call to cache these. You can use on after tool call to also augment the result of the tool call. So for example, if you didn't like it for some reason, or you need to redact something, you can do that. For example, on chunk allows you to change the chunks that are streaming in. So for example, let's say you stream in a secret from your database in the text, you can like redact it on the fly. You can also listen to, for example, on usage, and if you're building an analytics platform, you just listen to these callbacks. They get called on each iteration, so you can just like pick up these events and then send them to your analytics platform. And there's a whole slew of things you can do. And for example, for the lazy tool discovery, we already said like you can lazy load tools. So for example, you can use the onConfig on the first run to only provide a single tool. And for example, that tool is going to be get all products. And then when the tool is called, you're gonna say, okay, so this would happen in this step. And then when the tool is called, you get into the iteration loop. On the next callback, you're gonna say, okay, now make all the tools available, or for example, mark some of them as lazy, some of them are not lazy. So there's like a infinite sea of possibilities you can do here with middleware. And you can even like provide middleware exports from your libraries, and then for example provide utilities for your users, or for example web search or whatever. And yeah, you can like read through this blog post that explains in depth on how it works, what you can do with it. For example, with the initial release, we actually shipped 2 middlewares. The first one is tool cache middleware, and it does what I just said it does. So basically it allows you to cache middleware. So for example, you tell it the time to live, max size, tool names you want to cache, and then you can even provide stuff like cache keys or pluggable storage like Redis or whatever you want. And then the other one is the content guard middleware that allows you to basically like redact secrets or protect against swear words or whatever. So for example, here you can see there are rules, the strategy on how you process it, on filtered and all these cool things. And then we also added these cool sections on like to give you ideas on what you can build in middleware, like per iteration tool swapping, token budget enforcement, deferred analytics, tenant aware prompt injection, like all these different kinds of things that you can build with them. And yeah, that's it for middleware. And the last but not the least is real-time support. And now we actually allow you to spin up real-time conversations with an AI agent in your application. And I'm not gonna go too deep into this one, but basically you can read the blog post for yourself as well. But what you do is on the server, you create like a real-time token, you send it back to your client, and this is how you construct it for 11 labs. And then, for example, on the client, you have the useRealtimeChat, and basically what it allows you to do is get all of these props. So for example, status, error, connect, disconnect, messages, mode, start listening, stop listening, interrupt, send text, send message, input, output level, wherever. And then you just like get the token, you pass in the adapter, you say what the voice is, the instructions, and you're off to the races. You build your real-time application with AI, and you can do whatever you want with it. There's a whole blog post you can read on what the mode tells you, how it detects voices, audio visualization, live transcripts, interruptions, yada yada yada. You can do a lot of stuff, so it's really up to you what you need and what you want to build. And that is it for today's announcements of TanStack AI. These features are mind-blowingly good. I really am excited to bring all of this to you guys, and I'm really interested in what you think and what you are gonna use from all of this. And if you like any of it or if you hate any of it, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Bye!